Hey everyone, I'm going to go over some best practices for your e-portfolios. So I have three portfolios put up from former students, and so I'm going to start with Mike Scharf. I really liked how he had this kind of plain background. All of his titles are very easy to see. He had this lovely picture of himself, and he put his autobiographical sketch from the week one forum into as small a blurb as possible. He really tightened it up, which I really recommend that you put as short, kind of a short and sweet little blurb as possible here. Remember that on a website, you want to keep it simple. You want to really keep it light and easy, and you don't want to give your readers a ton to read. And then he actually put the really most important points of his educational philosophy, he put into little bullet points here. So it's really easy to get a sense for who he is as a teacher in very few words right up front. I think that's a really great idea. He has his full educational philosophy statement from 539 later on, and that's going to be a couple pages long, but this gives a little bit of it gives you a good sense, at least, of who he is as a teacher right up front. Okay, and the web pages he has across here. You have an opportunity to put them down on the side or up top. He chose up top. In fact, all three of the examples you'll see chose to list the web pages up top. So there's a page for each standard, and he titled that with each standard. The only thing I wish that he had done differently here is to at least put CSTP Standard 1 : engaging all students in learning. Something that, a parent's not going to know what these CSTP standards are. And frankly, at the district level, there might be an HR person or someone who's doing some screening before they send their applications forward. They may not know what some of these CSTP standards are. So thinking about who your audience might be and what they might know and not know, I would recommend putting something meaningful, something that really speaks to the content of the standard right up front on the title. You can see this core narrative is rather short. I really, again, recommend that you be as concise as possible in writing your core narratives. And then here, what he did was he added a button. Button is really a nice way to look at linking to your portfolio. So when you link to this ethnography, you can see it actually pulls to his ethnography. So he retitled it 539 Core Narrative Number 1 document, which is somewhat helpful for us as instructors, but it's not going to be helpful for your readers later on. Just remember that the people that you are showing this website to, your employers, parents, etc., they have no idea what APU's courses looked like or what they were. So I would actually still put maybe a CSTP 1 engaging all students, ethnography or artifact number 1, or it's something that will be meaningful to a person who has not taken any of these courses through APU or even knows about them. So he put his school ethnography, and you can see he redacted anything that he thought would be indicating what this community is. So that's one thing that I would encourage you to do when you look at embedding your ethnography. Just redact information that you think might be not good for someone to see. Okay. CSTP Standard 2, he put a classroom management plan. So you see one thing that's different from his other page, there's a huge amount of space here. You really want to consolidate that. So really what he did here with spacing is much more reasonable. So just kind of be aware of those kinds of things visually when you look at your website. And there's a way to preview your website at any time so that you can see what the viewer will see. So here he put a classroom management plan from one of his courses in his credential work courses. Now here there's extra space up top, so just make sure Your spacing is really good. So he did his framework evaluation from 537, linked it to CSTP Standard 3, CSTP Standard 4. He put his literature review, which had to do with dyslexia, because to him that spoke to this idea of planning, instruction, and learning design for all students and his ability to differentiate, because he had done this work about dyslexia. So you have to decide from your literature review from 538 which of these standards it specifically speaks to. CSTP Standard 5 was his assessment plan from, I forget which course, and then Standard 6, his Soul of Teaching Historical Synthesis paper. Now, again, Soul of Teaching means nothing to people outside of APU, so I would really refrain from referencing specific courses within your credential and master's program. He has his resume in a separate page, which is great. I would just encourage you to have some narrative here, even if it's just a one sentence, please click the button below to see my resume. That would be better than just having this button hanging out in space. But you can see his resume here. It links to, and then he has his full statement of educational philosophy, which again, at least he has a little bit of some narrative, some verbiage here. Now you can see he also included assessment and 2 lesson plans with examples of materials from that lesson. Instead of having those here, what I would suggest for you guys is that you link those to whichever standard you would like that to link them to. So whichever one you think is a good standard, I would encourage you to do that, such that, let's say you wanted to put a lesson plan in and you thought, hey, that has to do with engaging all students in learning. Great. Put a line after your ethnography button is put in, and then put a second core narrative underneath that so that the standard scrolls a little bit. And then you can have a button for your lesson plan. If you think it's standard 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, whichever one you wanted to link it to, just go ahead and add 2, 3 artifacts to each of these CSTP standards. I mean, in some ways, the more the merrier, as long as, like I said, those core narratives are kept really short. In fact, even this much can be probably tightened up a bit. So just really have a pay attention to that. All right, I wanted to really quickly go over a couple other ones. Laura Moran did a really good job also of incorporating graphics next to her narratives. So instead of, this is her home page, instead of a picture of herself or her classroom, she put this little, she had these little things, which I actually personally would prefer not to have a bunch of disparate types of images. But what I do like is that she included one image with each of her core narratives. So it makes it bright and light, and here she is, social emotional learning, and you can see she varied where the image would be, and it really is very cool. So subject matter expert for CSTP Standard 3, you know, this kind of community light bulb thing, question mark, next to CSTP Standard 4. And then she has CSTP Standard 5, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I wanted to show is that instead of putting a button, she used the Google Drive embedding tool, so that she has this little thing to click the full assignment, please click the Google Drive symbol. And what that does is, instead of taking you into that assignment within the working portfolio, it pulls it up so that you have a unit that's put here. Now, be careful if you do not share your assignments appropriately, and your assignment sharing should be anyone with the link can view. If your sharing says anyone at APU with the link can view, then anyone outside of APU who has not logged in with an apu.edu ID they're not going to be able to see it at all. They're going to get an error message instead. So you really want to make sure that the link sharing is correct. So yeah, so this is, I would get rid of the word signature assignment. That doesn't mean really anything to people outside of APU. TEP 522, I would get rid of that. That doesn't mean anything to people outside of APU, but it is nice to have this stuff pop up on the same page such that you're really not moving anywhere to navigate your website. So that was actually a really cool thing. So, you know, all of her stuff, her resume, again, putting a little bit of a blurb there. So here's her resume, and you can see it pops up, and that's a nice way to look at it. Again, she had lesson plans and assessments separately. I would go ahead and embed those within the CSTP standards. I wanted to show too, with her standard 6, she actually included all of her mentor evaluations from each of the visitations she had from her university mentor in her clinical practice. So there's a lot of things that you can put in there. But I do like her use of graphics, and I wanted to show that she, instead of buttons, used this embedding tool. So that's a way you can go as well. Either one is fine. Now, Megan did a great job of, these nice, tight little core narratives. She was very good at being succinct. But you can see what she did was she actually embedded the assignment itself so that you have this scrollable thing here. I actually do not recommend this. The type is way too small for a lot of your readers, and it makes it just plain old difficult to read. And you're scrolling for days and days and days through this assignment right in the page itself. So I would not recommend, this thing. The other thing I would say is that she put a different image behind each one. I like the fact that, for example, we're on her CSTP5 page. I like the fact that she has the actual content of what CSTP5 is up here so that you know this is about assessment. Great. But having this really busy image behind it makes the type, it makes it very difficult actually to see what she's doing. And you can see that she's picked a different image behind each particular banner. So, but they're so busy that it does get in the way of really seeing the type. CSTP2 is particularly difficult because it's actually black behind black. And so you really have a difficult time seeing what she's written here. So just really, I like what both of these guys did in terms of having banners that are really easy to read. So just make sure you pay attention to things like that. Always be thinking about if you were a reader outside of APU, not having any real familiarity with our coursework and things like that. If you were a parent, not really having familiarity necessarily with all the CSTPs, have you made a website that's accessible, that's visually appealing, that's easy to read, that is concise, and that gets everybody, on the same page in terms of who you are as a teacher very easily. So kind of think about that as you put your portfolios together and have fun with it. Thanks.